"Honey, could you run the updated threat matrix slide? Just click the button." The voice belonged to Mark Renshaw, a man whose tailored suit was as sharp as his ambition and just as thin. He gestured dismissively toward the laptop at the far end of the polished mahogany table. In the sterile, refrigerated air of the Pentagon's sub-level briefing room, the condescension landed like a lead weight. Candace Riley didn't flinch. Her posture remained a study in stillness, a product of years spent holding her ground in places far less comfortable than this. Her long blonde hair was tied back in a neat professional bun, and the royal blue of her silk top was a single point of vibrant color in a room of gray suits and olive drab uniforms. She met Mark's gaze for a fraction of a second, her expression unreadable, before her eyes shifted to the massive wall-sized screen he was pointing at. "Of course," she said, her voice even and low. She reached over, her movements economical, and with 2 clicks of the trackpad, the new slide blinked into existence. It showed a complex web of data points, mapping cyber incursions across the Pacific Theater. A few of the junior analysts in the room scribbled notes. At the head of the table, Vice Admiral Hayes, a man whose face seemed carved from granite, watched the screen with an unnerving placidity, his aide, a sharp-eyed lieutenant commander, sitting ramrod straight beside him. Mark cleared his throat, basking in the temporary spotlight. "As you can see, Admiral, our predictive algorithm shows a 94% probability of a network breach originating from this sector within the next 72 hours. Our proprietary software is unparalleled." Candace's eyes narrowed slightly, not at Mark but at the screen. Her focus was absolute, scanning the lines of code and the geographical plot points that flowed across the display. She had built systems like this, but she had also broken them. She had lived inside the digital noise, listening for the whispers that preceded the storm. And she heard something now, a discordant note in Mark's symphony of self-congratulation. He droned on, his presentation a masterclass in corporate buzzwords, synergy, proactive frameworks, leveraging assets. Candace remained silent, her fingers hovering over her own keyboard. A quiet courtesy warred with a lifetime of ingrained duty. Duty to the mission, duty to the truth. In the world she came from, bad intelligence didn't just lose contracts, it cost lives. Finally she saw it, a ghost in the machine, a cascade of packet loss in the data stream from a key monitoring station in Guam, cleverly masked to look like routine atmospheric interference. Mark's algorithm, for all its proprietary brilliance, had interpreted it as a null set, effectively ignoring a massive blind spot. The 94% probability was a fantasy built on faulty data. The real threat wasn't where he was looking. It was hiding in the silence. She raised a single polite finger, a small gesture, but in the rigid formality of the room it was a thunderclap. Mark stopped mid-sentence, his face clouding over. "Yes? Do you need something?" He sounded like a man asking a flight attendant for a pillow. "The data from Station 79er Delta is corrupted," Candace said, her voice still quiet but cutting through the hum of the climate control. "The algorithm is misinterpreting packet loss as a non-event. The threat probability isn't 94%, it's indeterminate." The room went silent. The junior analysts looked up from their notepads, eyes wide. Mark's face, which had been a mask of confident salesmanship, began to crumble. A faint pink blotch appeared on his neck. "I'm sorry," he said, forcing a laugh that sounded like grinding gears. "Who exactly are you?" "My name is Candace Riley. I'm with the technical integration team." "The technical integration team," Mark repeated, drawing the words out as if they tasted foul. He looked around the room seeking allies. "And what exactly does the technical integration team know about advanced SIGINT architecture?" "Your job is to make sure the projectors work." A few of the civilian contractors near him chuckled nervously. Candace's expression didn't change. She was a rock in a stream, letting the current of his panic flow around her. "My job is to ensure the integrity of the data stream before it's presented," she corrected him gently. "And I'm telling you, it's compromised." "Compromised?" Mark scoffed, his voice rising in pitch. He strode down the length of the table until he was standing over her, using his height to try and intimidate. "This system was designed by the best minds at Etheria Defense. It's been vetted a dozen times. Are you telling me that you, a tech support specialist, have found something they all missed?" He was speaking to her, but his performance was for the Admiral. He was trying to frame her as a disruptive, unqualified subordinate, a hysterical woman, perhaps. "I'm not questioning the design of the system, Mr. Renshaw," Candace replied, her gaze unwavering. "I'm questioning the information you're feeding it. Garbage in, garbage out. The term, a basic tenet of data science, hung in the air. It was an accusation of incompetence, and Mark felt its sting. His face was now a deep, angry red, "I want to see your credentials," he snapped. "Right now. What's your clearance level? Who is your direct supervisor? Did you even go through the proper security screening to be in this room?" He was creating a scene, hoping to bury the substance of her claim under a mountain of procedural nonsense. He was weaponizing bureaucracy. It was a common tactic in this world, but it was a language Candace also understood. She slowly slid her ID badge across the table. Mark snatched it up. He squinted at the small photo, at the simple title, Senior Analyst. "Senior Analyst," he sneered. "That's a rather vague title. Doesn't tell us much, does it? Doesn't tell us what gives you the right to interrupt a flag officer briefing." He tossed the badge back onto the table, where it skittered to a stop next to her laptop. His eyes fell on a small, heavy object sitting beside it, a metallic coin, dark and burnished with a complex crest on its face. He pointed at it with a theatrical flourish. "What's this?" "Your little good luck charm. Did you bring your lucky penny to the big meeting?" The room was thick with a new kind of tension now. It was no longer about data or algorithms. It was a raw public humiliation. Candace's gaze flickered down to the coin. Her fingers, almost unconsciously, brushed against its milled edge. The sterile chill of the briefing room dissolved. For a heartbeat, she wasn't there. She was in the suffocating heat of a steel container in Ramadi, the air thick with the smell of hot electronics and stale coffee. The only light came from the green glow of a dozen monitors, her face reflected in each one. Outside, the dull crump of distant mortars was the evening soundtrack. The coin wasn't on a table, it was being pressed into her palm by a man whose face was painted in camouflage, his eyes weary but grateful. He was a Delta operator, a ghost who moved through the shadows of the war, and his team had just walked out of a perfectly laid trap because of a whisper she had plucked from the ether. "You hear things no one else does, Gunny," the operator had rasped, his voice rough with dust and dehydration. "You saved our asses back there. All of us. Take this. You're one of us." The memory was gone as quickly as it came, leaving an echo of heat and adrenaline in its wake. She looked back up at Mark Renshaw, her eyes clear, her composure absolute. The coin was not a good luck charm. It was a marker. It was a receipt for blood and sacrifice, paid in full by her and the men she had protected with ones and zeros. Mark, oblivious, mistook her silence for defeat. He saw a woman being put in her place. He turned back to the head of the table, a triumphant smirk on his face. "Admiral, my apologies for the interruption. As I was saying, our projections are solid. I'm not sure what this young woman's actual rank or position is here, but clearly she's out of her depth." That was the line, the one that sealed his fate. A few of the junior contractors, taking their cue from their boss, let out small sycophantic laughs. They saw a woman being dismissed. But at the head of the table, Vice Admiral Hayes saw something else entirely. He hadn't missed the coin. He hadn't missed the quiet, unshakable authority in Candace's bearing. It was a posture he had seen 1,000 times in the most competent, battle-hardened, non-commissioned officers in the service. While Mark was grandstanding, the Admiral had leaned slightly toward his aide, Lieutenant Commander Rostova. Rostova, who had been typing silently on a secure tablet since the moment Candace first spoke, angled the screen toward him. Her fingers had been flying across a secure network, cross-referencing a name with a service record. What she had found was astounding. The audience, if they could have seen the screen, would have seen the secret laid bare. It was an image of Candace Riley, 10 years younger, in a Marine Corps dress blue uniform. Her hair was still blonde, but pulled back so tightly it was severe. The collar of her uniform bore no officer's insignia. Instead, on her sleeve were the 3 stripes up and 2 rockers down of a gunnery sergeant, an E7, the backbone of the Corps. Below the photo was a wall of text that would have made Mark Renshaw's blood run cold. Riley, Candace M. Branch, United States Marine Corps, rank Gunnery Sergeant, retired. MAS 2629, Signals Intelligence Electronic Warfare Chief, and below that, a list of citations that read like the index of a book on modern warfare. Bronze Star Medal, Joint Service Commendation Medal, with V for Valor. Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal, Combat Action Ribbon, Presidential Unit Citation. She had served in Fallujah, in Ramadi, in the Helmand Province. Her file was flagged with a dozen acronyms that denoted service with the most elite and secretive units in the American military. She wasn't just a tech. She was a goddamn oracle of the digital battlefield. A warrior who fought with radio waves instead of a rifle. Admiral Hayes read the screen, his expression unreadable. He absorbed the data, his mind processing the profound disconnect between the quiet woman in the blue top and the decorated combat veteran on the screen. He looked at Mark Renshaw, who was now puffing out his chest, convinced he had won. He looked at Candace, who sat with a stillness that was not submission but patience. And Mark, drunk on his perceived victory, decided to press his advantage. He felt the momentum was his. He saw a chance to utterly vanquish this upstart analyst. In fact, Mark declared, his voice ringing with false authority, "I don't think she should be in this room at all. Her presence is a security risk. Her baseless claims are a distraction from the vital work we're doing here. Security." He looked toward the armed Marine guards standing by the door. "Can someone please escort this woman out? She's disrupting a Pentagon briefing, and I question whether her clearance is even valid." It was the final, fatal overreach. He had accused a decorated Marine veteran of being a security risk inside the Pentagon. He had in essence called for a gunnery sergeant to be thrown out of a war room. The Marine guards by the door stiffened, their eyes flicking toward the Admiral awaiting a command. The entire room held its breath, but the command didn't come from the guards. It came from the head of the table. There was a sound, a simple, heavy sound. The scrape of a wooden chair against the floor. Vice Admiral Hayes stood up. He was a tall man, made taller by the immaculate cut of his service dress white uniform. The 3 silver stars on his collar glittered under the recessed lighting. When he stood, every other military person in the room, from the lieutenant commander to the Marine guards, instinctively straightened their spines. In that room, his movement had the force of a tectonic plate shifting. He was the cavalry, all by himself. He didn't look at Mark. His eyes were fixed on Candace. He began to walk, his polished shoes making no sound on the thick carpet. He walked past the stunned junior analysts, past the gaping civilian contractors. He walked right past Mark Renshaw as if he were a piece of furniture. He stopped not in front of her but beside her, in the precise spot that military protocol dictated. He drew himself up to his full height, his back a rigid line. His right hand moved with a speed and precision that belied his age. It snapped to the brim of his combination cover in a salute so sharp, so perfect it seemed to cut the air. The sound of his palm making contact was like a rifle shot. He held the salute, his eyes locked on hers. The room was utterly, completely silent. "Gunnery Sergeant Riley." The Admiral's voice was a low baritone that resonated with command. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact, of recognition, of profound respect. "It's an honor to have you here." Candace looked up at him, a flicker of something. Surprise, gratitude. The ghost of a shared past crossed her features before being replaced by the ingrained discipline of a lifetime. She rose from her chair, her movements fluid and sure, and stood at attention. She couldn't return the salute in civilian attire, but her posture, her bearing, was its own form of acknowledgement. Admiral Hayes dropped his salute and turned to face the stunned, bewildered room. His eyes, cold and hard as chips of flint, found Mark Renshaw. "For those of you in this room who are confused," the Admiral began, his voice dangerously calm, "let me provide some clarity. This is Gunnery Sergeant Candace Riley, United States Marine Corps, retired, and the reason her title here is Senior Analyst is because there is no civilian equivalent for what she has done for this country." He took a step toward the center of the room, his presence dominating everything. "Mr. Renshaw, you stood here and you questioned her analysis of a SIGINT feed. Gunnery Sergeant Riley was the lead analyst for Task Force Neptune during the Second Battle of Fallujah. The intelligence she pulled from the air, from nothing, was directly responsible for neutralizing 3 high-level insurgent cells and saving an entire SEAL platoon from a complex ambush near the Jolan district. She did that from a steel box in the middle of a war zone, with minimal sleep and maximum pressure, while people like you were probably working on your golf swing." A wave of shock rippled through the room. The faces of the contractors had gone from smug to ashen. Mark Renshaw looked as if he had been physically struck. "You pointed to her coin and called it a good luck charm," the Admiral continued, his voice dropping even lower, making it more menacing. "That is a task force command coin. They don't give those out for participation. They give them out for valor, for saving the lives of the men on the ground. You mocked a piece of this woman's history that was paid for with courage you couldn't possibly comprehend." He let the words hang in the air, a public indictment. He then turned his gaze back to Candace, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. "Gunny, you said the data was corrupted. Show me." Candace nodded, sat down, and turned her laptop so the Admiral could see. Her fingers danced across the keyboard. Lines of code, raw data, and network diagnostics filled the screen. "The algorithm is sound, Admiral," she explained, her voice now filled with the quiet confidence of an expert in her element. "But Mr. Renshaw's team failed to account for signal degradation from a solar flare event over the Marianas Trench 2 days ago. It created ghost echoes in the data stream. They didn't see it because they were only looking at the finished product, not the raw feed. The real threat isn't in the Pacific Rim. She typed another command, and a different section of the world map lit up. It's here. A sleeper server in Estonia is pinging a Russian satellite network, masked as commercial traffic. It's a classic diversion. They wanted you looking west while they prepare to move east. It was brilliant, it was simple, and it was undeniably true. She hadn't just identified a flaw, she had uncovered the entire enemy strategy. Admiral Hayes nodded slowly, a look of profound respect on his face. He turned back to Mark, his expression once again like stone. Mr. Renshaw, in my world we verify before we vilify. We judge people on their performance, not our perception of their station. You dismissed one of the most decorated intelligence operators of the last 20 years because you couldn't see past her blouse. You jeopardized national security to protect your own ego. He paused, letting the weight of the accusation settle. Your presentation is over. Your contract is under review. Get out of my briefing room. Mark Renshaw simply wilted. He gathered his papers with trembling hands, not making eye contact with anyone, and practically fled the room. The Admiral then looked at Candace. Gunnery Sergeant, I apologize for my civilian contractor's behavior. Candace shook her head slightly. Not necessary, Admiral. He just made a mistake. She looked around the room, at the junior analysts who were now staring at her with a mixture of awe and terror. The only thing that matters is the standard. It doesn't matter who you are or what you look like. The standard is the standard. Don't soften it. Just apply it fairly to everyone. It was the NCO's creed, distilled to its purest form. Competence above all. As she spoke, another memory of the coin flashed in her mind. Not the moment she received it, but the moment she earned it. The frantic, garbled radio traffic of a SEAL team pinned down, their comms being jammed. The chaos on the screen in front of her. A blizzard of hostile signals. And her, the calm center of the storm. Her fingers flying, isolating one frequency, then another, peeling back the layers of electronic warfare until she found the enemy's command signal. She typed a single line of code, rerouting their own signal back on them, creating a feedback loop that blinded their communications. In the sudden blessed silence, she heard the SEAL team leader's voice, clear as a bell. Copy, Gunny. We see him. Hostile command node is down. You just saved our lives. That was the truth behind the coin. A truth measured in heartbeats and saved lives. The fallout from the briefing was swift and decisive. Atheria Defense's contract was not only reviewed, it was suspended. An internal investigation was launched, and Mark Renshaw was fired before he even made it back to his office. The company, in a desperate attempt at damage control, was forced to implement a new series of mandatory training seminars on respecting veteran employees. Admiral Hayes personally requested that Candace Riley be promoted to lead the entire threat analysis division for the Pacific Theater project, a position she accepted with her usual quiet grace. Her first order of business was to overhaul the data intake protocols, insisting that every piece of intelligence be vetted by human analysts before being fed to any algorithm. Weeks passed. The sterile corridors of the Pentagon became Candace's new domain. She moved through them with the same understated confidence she had carried her entire life. She mentored the young analysts, teaching them to listen to the data instead of just looking at it. She was respected, and for the first time in her civilian career she was truly seen. One afternoon, she was in a small coffee shop across from the Pentagon, reviewing morning intel reports on a tablet. The bell above the door chimed, and she looked up to see a familiar if humbled figure. It was Mark Renshaw. He looked smaller without his expensive suit, dressed in a simple polo shirt and jeans. He saw her, hesitated, then walked over to her table. "Miss Riley," he began, his voice barely a whisper. Can I talk to you for a second?" Candace looked up, her expression neutral. She simply nodded. He stood there awkwardly, wringing his hands. I wanted to apologize. What I did in that room was unforgivable. I was arrogant, and I was wrong. I had no idea. I am so sorry." The apology was genuine. She could see the shame and regret in his eyes. He wasn't making excuses. Candace took a slow sip of her coffee. She thought for a moment, then looked him in the eye. "Apology accepted, Mr. Renshaw." He seemed stunned by the simplicity of it. That's it, she confirmed. "You made a mistake. You've paid the price for it. What happens next is up to you." He swallowed hard, looking down at the floor. "I don't know what to do. My career is over." Candace considered him for a long moment. She could have walked away. She owed him nothing. But the NCO in her, the leader who built people up instead of tearing them down, saw a teachable moment. "Your career isn't over," she said, her voice softening slightly. "Your ego just took a direct hit. There's a difference. She closed her tablet. You're a smart guy, Mark. You just have bad instincts. You trust slick presentations more than you trust proven people. Let me give you some advice. He looked up, desperate. Anything. Go find a job at a smaller company, a place where you have to do the actual work, not just manage it. And when you get there, she leaned forward slightly, find the grumpiest, most senior NCO veteran on the payroll, the one everyone's a little afraid of. Buy that person a coffee, shut your mouth and just listen. Always trust your NCOs. They know where the bodies are buried. She gave him a small, knowing smile. For the first time, Mark Renshaw smiled back, a genuine, grateful expression. It was a seed of mentorship, planted in the unlikeliest of soil. As he walked away, Candace opened her tablet again, the blue of her top a calm, steady presence in the bustling cafe. The work was waiting. The threats were always there, hiding in the noise. And she was there to listen. If Candace Riley's story of quiet competence and unshakable valor resonates with you, show your support. Like this video, subscribe to She Chose Valor, and share it to honor all the women who serve in silence. Thank you for watching.